I do want to make sure that we cover a topic that you and I kind of talked about offline, which is your work with women's health, especially with like sexual health and libido. Can you tell us a little bit about your research into that world?
Yeah, 100%. So I feel like this one's really important, but I feel like because it's kind of a taboo topic and not a lot of people feel super comfortable getting into it, it's just not like talked about as much and touched. So I did want to open up the space because I feel more and more comfortable to talk about it. But aside from like many other symptoms or things I was lacking in on the plant-based diet, one of the things that I just was like kind of like didn't think there was a solution to, or didn't even think to look for a solution, or didn't think to like be like, is something wrong with me, is the fact that I had really irregular periods and a really low like libido and sex drive. And I was just like, this really sucks too, because if you are like dating, or if you're married, or however you're interacting with people and wanting to like fulfill your sexual needs and even getting in touch with your own hormonal health, if you're not feeling like empowered and healthy with yourself about that, then that's really, really going to be hard to like cultivate that or create with someone else, or even just connect in general. So there are, a few specific points here. One of them I'll dive into. We talk about how, in regards to ancestral health, we have our human brain, which is kind of like our prefrontal cortex, and our animal brain, which is our hypothalamus. And our hypothalamus or animal brain is going to be consistently looking for two things. One of them is food, because we need food to survive and we want to have as much food as possible. That's where binge eating actually stems from. It's not always an emotional thing. It can just be our animal brain on hyperdrive, which can create an addiction. When we do something multiple times, it creates an addiction. Similarly, the same thing, just like food, is also sex. And the reason why is not because like, oh my gosh, we're just like so like such inappropriate human beings. It's because survival of the fittest, innately, like humans were meant to procreate, and that is how you continue a species along. So it's literally wired in us, and that's why like also men and female differ a little bit, but we are wired to consistently be looking for that, because that means survival. So you need food to survive, and you need sex to continuously procreate and create more of the human species. And regardless if you want to have a kid or not, I think that is important for people to actually honor, because just because you don't want to have a kid, it's great to still enjoy your sex life, or, dive into and explore your sexuality. So with that, I think with the vegan eating, because it's just, it's really not satiating you, you're not able to create a healthy hormonal balance. For a lot of women, I've noticed, and for myself as well, you might be in like a hyper masculine drive. And I think it's really beautiful to be in both feminine energy and masculine energy. We need that balance. And I think the reason I was able to run a business and I'm able to get stuff done is because I can, use my masculine energy for that, but I'm also able to be kind of soft and more nurturing and be able to like put love into what I do with the feminine energy. But when you are so depleted, like let's say, especially with the protein, you're not getting enough protein. And then with the fats, especially that like saturated fat is so important to create a healthy hormonal balance. So when you're deprived with that, it's almost like your animal brain is getting signaled like, I am in starvation mode. So when you're not getting food and your body feels like it's starved, even if you're shoving vegetables down your throat, then your body is going to, especially for a woman, it's your body's so intelligent. Your body's going to know it's not safe for me to have sex right now, because if I have sex, I might have a baby, and I'm definitely not prepared to have a baby. Like your body is literally probably not going to let you get pregnant, or it's going to make it that much harder if your body is not feeling satiated. This is why so many women who are wanting to get pregnant, they're like, oh, my doctor said I probably have to have, at least some fish, or supplement with omega-3s and supplement with protein, or have like some more meat. And so that is a really, really important indicator. So that's like kind of an overview. And then there's like definitely a lot of like little things to get into as far as like that healing process of libido, sexual health, regulating your period and hormones.
Yeah, you mentioned proteins and fats as being so important for all of that. Which one do you find you have to work with women the most on? Is it the protein or the fat?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So this is like a two-part answer because for protein, it's usually like women aren't scared of the protein. They're super open to it, but they don't realize like how little their protein is. And I'm not into tracking unless I'm working with a client on like, hey, let's just set like an overview. Let's see where you're at so that I have the information of like where to guide you. So that's the only time I have someone track, and I'm not having them track calories. I'm just having them track their like protein and then also fats to see where they're at. So with the protein, it's usually like they're open to having more protein, but they're just like so like they're probably having less than 50 grams of protein. So to get them to even 100 grams or 100 to like 120, they need to be okay with eating more meat. Fat, on the other hand, it's been so instilled in our society that fat is bad. And it's unfortunate that the fat in food, like the macronutrient fat, is the same word as fat on your body. Like they should be two different words because they're
Totally.
easy to confuse it. They're completely different things. So of course, when two things have the same word, it's like, oh, I'm having fat. That's going to make me fat. And there's a lot of bad kinds of fat. So we definitely want to avoid those. But there's also bad kinds of carbs and there's good kinds of carbs. So with the fat, there's just misinformation. And so the saturated fats, someone looks at like a steak with the fattiness and they're like, oh my gosh, this is going to give me heart disease. And I'm like, this is what I start salivating over. This is like ancestrally, like, this is actually like survival, and not just survival, but it's going to put us in more abundance as far as signaling to our body because we feel so satiated from it. And it's going to allow us to feel so fueled for a long period of time. So a lot of people who are dealing with like cravings or even binge eating or like sugar addictions, like a lot of times going hard on the fat heals a lot of those.
Yeah, I love that. I find with most women, they are willing to address the protein thing a little bit more than the fat thing, but it's in a way that it's more likely going to be like, okay, I had 4 ounces of chicken in my salad, so now I'm going to go up to 6. And it's like, no, you should eat like 10 eggs, or you should have like a full pound of steak and only stop until you really have like a strong aversion to the food that you were just eating that was delicious. It all of a sudden doesn't look so good anymore. Now you know that you've really filled up and you've given yourself permission, is kind of how I think about it, to really go after those types of foods, the red meat in particular, steaks, ground beef. Is that what you found as well?
100%. Yeah. It's interesting because I first transitioned to the animal-based diet, doing like a lot of salmon and eggs and stuff. And I've almost like at the beginning of this year, I almost had kind of like a slight aversion to eggs and I couldn't eat them for a while. It was really interesting. And now I'm reincorporating them again. And same with seafood. I love fish. I love salmon. I appreciate it, but I don't do it on the daily. It's more of like a treat as well. But the red meat is what just feels so good for my system. But it's so interesting you mentioned about the aversions. Like your body is so intelligent. It tells you how much you need. So that's why I don't even do the calorie counting, is like, if you're just primarily eating meat as a foundation, your body's going to tell you when you've had enough. And that is like that's true intuitive eating and intuitive signaling. And then same with like health markers. So health markers are like what's indicating you're in good health. So again, like regardless of someone deciding to have a child or not, you want to look at your fertility markers. So if you just care about your health as a human being, even if you don't care about dating or like having amazing sex, or if you don't care about having a kid, but for a woman, and there's like the equivalent to for men, but for women, if you have a healthy period, that's a healthy fertility marker. It means that your body's feeling safe enough to have a baby. And I'm obviously talking about women like pre-menopause, so it'll be different for after that. But I can speak on women for pre-menopause. That's what I've experienced in my life. So healthy period, which looks like a cycle that's in sync. And there's a lot of like apps that you can use these days, or even like your thermometer to track your ovulation. So doing that was such an empowering tool that that was like healthy for me, tracking, getting off birth control, and then just being a little bit more aware of like when my fertile window is. And we like disregard a lot of that because that's like such a big part of, you know, Homo sapiens or just animals in general, but it's like such a shameful thing in society. So again, we don't talk about it a lot, and that's why I'm so excited and grateful for you to open up the space to talk about it. And so that, and then the other thing is going to be like a good libido and then like good sex drive. So there's obviously a lot of other things like more on a psychological and spiritual thing that could be blocking that. But as far as just feeling like drawn to, you know, that connection and that like act, that is very, very healthy actually. So for me, it's like I hadn't even really experienced that for so many years of my life. So I didn't realize like what I was missing out on. And after coming out of that, I was like, wow, this is like a really healthy thing that we need to be monitoring for ourselves. So it's like pretty funny to like, to witness this in me now, but sometimes like after I eat a full on like really nice steak, it's some of the times where almost immediately after I'm just like, wow, this feels like really good. I can feel like turned on, or just like all of the other things in a more like sex capacity, like, you know, using those terms. So I think there's a lot to it. And I definitely didn't feel like that on a plant-based diet. So I was like very surprised. And I think paying attention to those fertility markers, because again, going back to what I was explaining before, if you are having that high sex drive, that means your body is telling you, hey, I'm really healthy right now. I'm healthy enough to have a baby. I'm healthy enough to like feel this attraction and this draw. So that means like, that's just a really good, healthy health marker. It doesn't mean like you're an animal, you're such a horny person. Like that's another thing that society is really shamed, that I want to like break the story of for people.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you being willing to discuss that. That can be a difficult kind of taboo thing to talk about. If you keep talking about it, I am going to recommend a business name for you. I'm going to require a commission for this. I thought of this earlier. Kama Sucha. What do you think?
I've had like definitely like a lot of jokes on that, which is amazing too, because like the small tangent with that is like, you know, if you look at the ancient yoga scriptures, like yoga wasn't supposed to be like, don't eat meat, don't have sex, don't have any of these things. It was like, how can you be empowered to find your truth, like while you're eating or while you're meditating or while you're even having sex? Like, how can you like find your truth and spirituality? And we can use the words like the divine, like how can you find that in what you're doing? So for me, it's like even when I'm eating meat, like I'm finding more of my spiritual path while I'm eating. So it's just like so interconnected, but I love that business name and idea for sure.
I'm going to take a commission, but yeah, you're right. We talked about it earlier with yoga, but Kama Sutra is so much more than our westernized idea that it's just sex. It's all kinds of things. It's very all encompassing, and a lot of people around here don't really realize or understand that. I do. Before we leave the topic of women's health, I, I, I don't know if it's more prevalent in women than it is in men. I think it's kind of